Good afternoon. Thanks again for those of you who stayed behind. I think a few new faces. Really pleased to be talking to you again. Last session was great. I hope you enjoyed it for those who were here. I did forget to thank Rika and In5 and the team. These guys are awesome, and they organise a lot of these events for businesses, small businesses, startups. So really good the work that they do. So I'm pleased to be a part of that and talking to you today. So really great topic. Some businesses do fail. It's a fact of life. Some businesses succeed. So what I want to talk to you about and is bringing some of my experience into play in terms of everything that I've done in my life and really look at some of the areas that is not by any means the only way you can succeed, of course. So I'm not an expert on everything. I wish I was. But it's really just focusing on a couple of key areas which I think are paramount for businesses to be able to succeed and reduce the risks of failure for sure. So I want to give you my perspective on this, of course. First, maybe a little bit about me. Some of you who were in the previous session will have probably heard me talking about this, but essentially my whole life has been in sales and sales management. Most recently, I was a director at IBM, running a sales operation for them in the Middle East and Africa. So I've been here for 6 years. I'm not sure, I was saying before, I'm not sure if I qualify as an entrepreneur or because half my life I've been an entrepreneur. The other half was really employee. Within the entrepreneur part of my life, I did start 5 separate companies, and one of them was an outstanding success, thankfully, but a couple of them were kind of really, really bad. So I really crashed and burned, and I did learn a few things. I will share those with you, but. And a couple of them, honestly, were the hardest ones. The crash and burn wasn't so bad, honestly. At the end, it was probably a good thing. But the ones that hurt the most were the ones that were mediocre. Not quite sure whether you're going to ever hit the right notes. Not quite sure if you're going to not make payroll next month. So we can talk a little bit about that today. But the best one was the one that was successful, which in 2004, I sold a fairly large company with multiple geography coverage, an IT technology company. I spent all my life in technology, so I apologise for that, but it has been my passion. And in July this year, I started my new entrepreneurial adventure, if you like, and I started working with an Australian company called Maestrano. And for those of you who were here before, you got a bit of a little pitch about that, and it's a solution marketplace for small business. So the agenda today I want to cover success and failure. How do you define that? I want to talk about execution, and I want to talk about transforming results. So it's okay to sort of talk about things that can be good and bad, but really what can we really do that would make a difference, not academically, but really next week. What can you do this week? What can you learn this week that can actually make a difference to your sales results or to your revenue next week? If we can achieve some of that, I think my job is done. So first I want to start with one of my favourite quotes, is that success is all about luck, right? Just ask any failure. And my second favourite saying is, many of life's failures are people who did not realise how close they were to success when they gave up. I'm reading it out for the people at the back, so pardon me for that at the front. And essentially, whether you're in business for a long time or a short time, you probably had a few ups and downs, and if you've had a few downs, then remember success could be just around the corner. Which leads me back to my point before, where the hardest companies that I were ever involved with that I started were the ones where I wasn't really sure, and no matter what I did, I just couldn't get the right traction, and I just couldn't get the success I thought was going to come. So that's probably the hardest position to be in, when you're not quite sure what else you need to do. So hopefully today I'm going to share a lot of material. I'm going to go pretty fast, and we'll have time for questions and that. But some of it is a little bit academic. Some of it will seem obvious, but I really want to leave you behind a couple of key elements that will perhaps help you and your business. So, to the core of the topic. Now, this is the good news. Only 30% of startups fail within 2 years. Is that good or bad? I mean, I think that's pretty good. 70% are still around. This is according to the OECD, and they did an international study, which was really on job creation, which is, everyone recognises SMEs as a powerhouse of business, because there's so many of them. So the OECD did a very interesting report. It's about 300 pages long, but their findings were that 30% of startups fail within 2 years, and 50% have failed within 5 years. So I think that's good news. I mean, some of them were meant to fail anyway. Wrong idea, wrong place, whatever. But it's still, if it can be scary or it can be exciting. But the bottom line is it's a fact. This is according to the OECD. So 6 areas to consider. I've taken some input from the OECD report, which is, as I said, quite long. But some of and added my sort of twist and experience to the whole subject. And basically, the key areas that affect success or failure are kind of in these 6 areas. I'm sure there are other details, depending on who you talk to, the spin. But overall, if you're speaking generically, it's access to funding, access to market, access to technology these days, access to skills, the business environment generally, what's going on around us, and also management capabilities. That is, the capabilities of the management, if you like, to rephrase that. And I'm just going to cross out, for the purpose of today, access to markets, technology, and skills, because fundamentally they roll up into having access to funding. So if you're in a round of funding and you're developing your business, these are some of the key areas you're targeting to provide you a platform for your business. So I'm just going to take it out of today's discussion and leave us with 3 key areas. And what I like to focus on today is not so much access to funding, because there's some great, I think earlier today it was a great discussion, a great presentation from someone who came this morning. And there are a lot of sessions this week within 5. And the business environment, well, there's not a lot we can do to change the business environment. We really have to adapt to that in business environment. And I really want to talk about some key management capabilities that maybe can make a big difference if you approach it slightly differently. So I'm not a management consultant, and I had this slide up a little bit earlier. Now we're going to cover it in a bit more detail now. Now, I'm not an expert on any of these, actually, except maybe one, which is sales. And various discussion points will be appropriate in any level of detail that you like on any of them. So if you talk about marketing, I mean, there are some sessions throughout the week around digital marketing and other subjects, which are going to be very powerful. So we're not going to dive into any detail on too many things, except one thing that I think is paramount for small businesses. And as I mentioned in my earlier session, there's going to be a different management capability needed depending on where you are. We talked about it last time, because as you scale, you need different skills. So a tiny startup with no employees doesn't really need a lot of HR capability yet. So what we're talking about is really having fit for purpose, appropriate management skills in the business at the right time, so you can grow and move to the next level. So I don't have all the answers, but we're going to cover some key ones. If you think about, as an example, when you're a startup, as I mentioned before, revenue is everything, and sales is everything. I mean, you can talk about cash, but if you haven't sold anything, it doesn't matter, right? It's So I've been told to put the microphone up here. I don't know if the people at the back can hear me, but I keep forgetting because I use my hand. So anyway, I'll try and keep it here. So revenue is paramount. When you grow, you start to really need to think about cash because, if you spend too much money, then it doesn't matter how much revenue you have, you're going to go broke. And as you scale, you'll probably start thinking more about return on investment, return on asset, how you deploy your resources and how effectively you're able to make those productive. If we take another example, from a HR or people's perspective, initially it's about you. It grows into becoming more about your team and how you manage that, and there are capabilities needed there. And then ultimately about culture and identity and how you manage that within your corporation by that point. So again, there's a lot of detail we can talk about. I won't spend too much time. From a sales perspective, initially, even in the break where I was talking to Mohammed, I think it's still here, and Mohammed. And initially, you may not have any employees that are specific, dedicated salespeople. So if you're in business for yourself, you might be doing all the pitching. But as you employ salespeople, you find out, having been one for many years, you find out how hard, one, it is to find them, but two, how hard it is to keep them, but three, the hardest thing is to manage them. They're impossible to manage. Any salespeople in the room? Yeah. Impossible to manage, aren't you? I admit it, it's the truth. But with the right tools, with the right, the right people, right attitudes, of course, it's not a problem. But as you grow, you have more and more salespeople, so you need some discipline around the sales techniques and process that become more and more important. As you scale, when you have multiple geographies, when you have salespeople in countries you may not have been yet, that becomes a totally different game. It becomes really, really difficult. Having been a sales director for a large company for many years, I can tell you it's almost impossible to standardise and get one process fits all. So a business can fail even if it has good revenues. Agreed? Yep. So if you have good revenues, business can still fail for many reasons. All right, but it's almost guaranteed to fail if you have no revenues or poor revenues. I'm trying to be polite, right? So being the sales guy, I admitted it up. Is that me or is that? Sorry. I'm wired up to the max. So I got 3 microphones on me. It's like a business is almost guaranteed to fail without revenues, and no revenues. You can only sustain that as long as your funding is going to allow it, or your investors will allow it. Startups and small businesses can really innovate around their sales process. This is one key area, I believe, in all the SME interactions I have with different companies around the UAE and other parts of the world, this is one area where you can really innovate. So if you're SME today, excuse me, you can really innovate how you go about your business. There's lots of tools we talked about earlier in terms of marketing and making sure people are aware who you are and bringing them to your site. SEO tools, lots of good digital marketing techniques that people adopt now. It's actually getting confusing. There's so much choice there. Excuse me. But a small business can really innovate around sales practices. Large companies just throw a lot of money at it and still get it wrong sometimes. But they too can innovate around their sales practices. And for those who can't read the bottom, there is no point in advertising. Let's say you spend a lot of money, put an ad in the paper, and let's say you put some SEO, you invest with Google AdWords and you get people to come to your site. And so you get leads coming to your website. There's no point in doing all of that if when the phone rings, nobody answers. So, that's kind of the worst possible scenario where you have no salespeople and no one picks up the phone, right? Now, you wouldn't do that, would you? No one does that, right? Sorry, no one does that. Oh, it does happen. Occasionally you think, although, the funniest thing is when you ring someone, a company, you've decided that you found them, you've decided that you'd like to at least inquire about what they can do for you. And when you ring the company, they answer the phone, hello? Do you guys get that occasionally? All right, so that's kind of an example of some of the innovation you can bring in straight away if that happens, right? You should not answer the phone, say hello. But I'm going to go in a little bit more detailed. Now I want you to solve this formula. So everyone will get the slides, by the way, they'll be available. There's a lot of material coming in. You'll probably need the slides just to think, what was that person saying the other day? So if cash comes from a customer payment comes from approximate invoices to that customer. Doesn't always equal, right? And maybe also with a lot of multiplied by the amount of nagging and chasing you do. Yeah. And then invoices comes from purchase orders, right? Yeah. And purchase orders come from sales. What does sales come from? Marketing, that's one, yeah. Anything else? Branding. Does a sale come from the marketing or the branding? Like, is there something needs to happen in between? Communication. Customer service. Word of mouth. All of these things are 100% correct. So what I want to go down into now, if you're happy, I want to go into the science of really what goes into this. So I'm a 25 plus years seller. I've managed large teams of salespeople into the multiple dozens. And in my experience, and now having moved into an area where I'm working with a lot of SMEs, I'm finding a place where I can really advise and make a difference. This is one of the key failings of small businesses, is that they don't have a handle on what it takes to actually convert leads to sales. And if you're interested in that, I'd like to cover that off today. So we're going to answer that X in a roundabout way. Just before I dive in, I want a lot of people, if they're accountants, there's one accountant, I met an accountant, I met one accountant, and I know the accountant's going to maybe argue with me a little bit or challenge me, and rightly so, but cash is king, right? Cash is king, but only after you have revenues. So cash without revenues is irrelevant. So whereas cash is fact, what's revenue? Fiction, right? Sometimes. Because you may not get the cash, right? If they don't pay you, there's no, it's fiction. So I don't want to go into that side of it, which is a very relevant. There's good advice around, accounts receivables management, financial management. A lot of people will give you a lot of good advice. So I want to talk about really what happens from the time you say, I want to build a business, through to bringing in the revenue, that no matter how much marketing you do, you've got to pick up the phone to get the customers to come to you. But also, in very few cases, unless you've got a magic business where you can just advertise something, service or product, and that customers buy it online without having to talk to a human being. Does anyone have that business?
If you're representing big brands.
Big brands, but does the cash come in without talking to a person? So, in other e-commerce, yeah, they exist, right? They do exist, yeah. But not everyone has that luxury. There are some commodity products that fly off the shelf in the supermarkets without. It's really all the branding, all the advertising that happens. And on the website, you go to a website, you buy Nike shoes, e-commerce, they're well known, and you know exactly what product you want. You order it online, no need for human interaction. If you don't have one of those businesses, you might want to look at how you go about building a sales practice that will capture more sales rather than let more go. And you might establish a strategy. For the business, you'll probably implement some marketing, which you mentioned earlier. So marketing it's very difficult to have revenues come in without the marketing. You've got to do some potentially some branding and all that stuff. Advertising, often some form or another now needs to happen. But at some point you're going to get leads and sales involved. You're going to have human interaction involved. And if you get that wrong, what happens? It does not convert, right? If you get it wrong, it will not convert. And that's the magic place we want to be, is the revenue. And when you have lots of that, we can start talking about financial management, other things that are obviously important. I won't cover off marketing and advertising and strategy are all very important topics. I'm going to stay away from that today. SMEs typically have good solid business plans and then move into the operation of it, and then it becomes so involved that they don't get to step out and work on the business. They're working in the business.
I have a question. Where does distribution infrastructure lead? I mean, there should be distribution here because I'm typically from this region and I work with a lot of creative industry over here. And what we're missing is the distribution. So you have the product, you have the marketing, you have the advertising, you have the leads.
Yeah.
You have some sales, but you can't have a point of sale.
Yeah.
So where does point of sale fall in this? Because distribution and point of sale has to fall in this.
Yeah, so there's a whole, in some industries, there's a whole distribution. If you're talking about retail, then you've got a whole wholesale distribution.
We've got a minus in this region. We've got a distribution gap. Do you feel that? Do you feel that too? There's an absolute missing link in the distribution.
Yeah.
How do we convert in that? So that five of us from the industry, we were completely lost.
Yeah, yeah.
Where
So I haven't really sort of factored distribution in this. I'm really covering off SMEs, smaller parts.
SMEs,
Yeah, but and most distribution companies, I know a couple of big ones here. They have a lot of salespeople, a lot of customer-facing or channel-facing people. So they're probably within this realms of our discussion today, but not kind of the core focus of what I'm covering off. But let's come back to that. Let's see what you think afterwards. Yeah. And distribution aside, what I'm finding really is at this level, we always tickety-boo at the strategy level, the marketing level, advertising. Excuse me. There's a lot of good advice, a lot of marketing companies, a lot of strategy companies, a lot of consulting companies, a lot of advertising in this region. Some of it fantastic, state-of-the-art stuff. But then lead capture, sales process is where I find it often goes wobbly. And that elusive revenue, we get some, but it's not systematic. So my belief is that you can't leave revenue to chance, and you have to have a practice in place that you build to put into a repeatable process that doesn't matter if the owner with the passion for the solutions and products is not there, it can still happen without them. So that's where I want to go. So here to the crunch of what today is all about, and then we can workshop a bit more, talk about some of these other things that you've raised. I want to focus on 10 steps that I believe, as a sales director, I've been involved with many projects. In a large corporation, it's kind of handed to you, and then you just take it and execute on it. But in a medium-sized company, you have to build the intelligence around how to go about executing in a large geography when there are many people from different backgrounds, different cultures, etc. So I'm going to talk about 10 fairly complex steps, but we can manage it, that will get us to improving. And we're talking about dials and levers. So we're not talking about silver bullets and magic pills. And remember, these slides are going to be available, right? I see people taking photos, but these slides will be available. So the first step is if you have salespeople, if you can't articulate your unique selling proposition or the unique value you bring to the table to your customer, whether it's through distribution or not, if you can't articulate it clearly and easy for me to say, succinctly, if you can't articulate it, how do you expect your salespeople to do the same? So we have some salespeople in the room, right? Have you ever been wondering, not in your current job, because I know you work here with your colleagues, but have you ever worked somewhere where you had no idea, really, how to differentiate yourself from the many others that were in the market competing with you. I mean, I know I have to be honest with myself. Sometimes it's very difficult to do because it's commodity oriented, right?
Yeah.
Now, and the thing with this USP, if your competitors say the same thing, whether it's true or not, you can't use it. So a bad example, or I'll use some example, a bad example, if your USP is, we are the best provider of consultancy services in the UAE, right? That's not going to work because no one believes it, for starters. So it's got to be specific and unique. So the second thing is if you come up with a good one, we provide the fastest turnaround of your audit report than any other company in the UAE, which may be true, right? Or I'm sure it is. And if you do that, but everyone else says the same thing, we're the fastest auditors in the country, you can't use that because then it becomes, you know, yeah, everyone says, yeah, so what? You know, so are they. So you've got to come up with your unique selling proposition or your unique business value that is truly unique and you can articulate it clearly. So if you're happy with that, then you could then take that to people who are going to be involved in the process and get them involved on the same page. Is that fairly straightforward, right? And fair enough. Any distribution aside, I'm probably not covering this. Probably not. But any questions? Yeah. So, yeah.
So from what you said, right? Just this morning today, right? I was on the road to DIP, and there was a van, right? So I think these guys were plumbers. I think I'm not too sure, right? So they had this saying that never do the same job again. So that's pretty awesome, right?
How many plumbers have you had that have come back maybe once or twice? I think I had that experience on the weekend actually. But yeah, I don't know whether that's a USP.
No, but it's a great.
It's a good catch, right?
The catch line. I mean, I remember it right off.
Yeah.
It was succinct.
If it's succinct and a little bit unique and not general, then maybe that one's a little bit general but catchy, you know. So that's good too. But when you're selling face to face, the van's not there, right? With the catchphrase, it's really when you're face to face, you have to be able to articulate why that person should be dealing with you as opposed to the next guy. So whether it's in a broad audience or in a face-to-face orientation, then you need to be able to articulate that clearly. And really what I find is a lot of SMEs, like medium-sized businesses even, the leadership is not able to articulate that. What do you think is going to happen if the leadership doesn't know, or they know in their heart, right, but they're not articulating it? What are the salespeople going to do? And the salespeople pick up the phone, or not just salespeople, but the other people in the organisation who are part of the selling process. So that's very important. So we're going to remember this one as our UBV, or unique business value, or USP if you prefer. Point number 2, and again this can cause some arguments if you like, but point number 2 I'd like to present you is that your products and services, depending on how many you have, not all leads are equal. So you really need to be able to articulate that UBV by customer and also by product. So if you sell cars and trucks and you sell to farmers and end users, those two different sort of areas, you cannot treat them all the same, right? So you have to really think about what are my customers that I want to deal with, and also what are the different products or services or brands that you represent. And then you should think about those, I believe, and a lot of people don't, but think about it individually rather than holistically. So, you know, what revenue expectations or targets do you want to really, you know, operate them not so much as individual businesses, but how are they all individually going to contribute to your overall target in your business. So I'm going to call that number 2 and the target. Some of this is a little bit motherhood, but we'll get there where it actually may make a difference. The other thing to work out based on those products is what is the average revenue expectation from a single sale, or when you close a deal, how much do you expect that to... This is not marketing and digital marketing, it's hardcore. So if you're a retail customer, someone walks in the door, if they buy an iPhone, you know exactly how much that's going to be, right? But your business may not be retail, it may be a little bit different, you may be providing services. So depending on what type of products and services you deal with, what is based on the types of customers. So the farmer buys a tractor and a truck, that's going to be a different proposition to the private person who buys a motor vehicle to drive from home and work. So differentiation around the average revenue expectation is quite important.
So again, what is the difference between this and the previous one, the targets?
So this is the overall target you have. You could say, I want to sell $1 million worth or 1 million dirhams a month of that product for that type of customers. Maybe today you have some targets. Maybe these targets are, my overall business must turn over this much money so I can pay the bills. Or you may then have that even more granular. You might say, services, certain types of products, you might categorize it. But I'm purely looking at it in terms of the sales process and the interaction you're going to have with people. So when someone picks up the phone and says, I'm interested in X, you know how to process that person and deal with them accordingly, as opposed to anybody else. So that's a very important differentiation. So good question, yeah. So this is how much you expect from a single sale, and this is how much you want overall per period, per month, per annum, whatever. Again, it sort of sounds like very low-level, simplistic stuff. It may start to make sense, and I hope you'll go away and sort of apply some of it to your business. It definitely makes a difference in the many interactions I've had, even just in the UAE in the last 6 months. So that's the average revenue expectation. It gets a little bit trickier. The other thing you have to think about is when you advertise on Google or in the newspapers, you get a certain number of leads. So these leads come in, someone picks up the phone. I don't even call them leads, they're inquiries, right? So you get an inquiry. What is the lead to opportunity ratio? So a lead is someone rings up and says, hello, I'm interested in X. How many of those turn into something that becomes the opportunity for you to engage with them properly? Now, it can be as low as 1% or 10%, or it could be anything, right? Depends on the volume, nature of the business. It could be, depends on how specific your industry, all sorts of things. But if it's a crowded market, if you have competitors, you're going to have people that are ringing up for the wrong reasons, and they'll fall off automatically. And then a 20% chance of them turning into an opportunity is usually a pretty good chance that's going to be on the money. Everyone that rings up your company and says, I'm interested in your product, you'll never get 100%, right? So you have to understand, of all the inquiries that come in, how many turn into potential closes or conversions. And that's your lead opportunity ratio. And it can really vary. If you have history, a lot of people don't measure this, right? So you're probably not measuring it today. If you implement some of the CRM tools we talked about earlier, help you measure some of that, which is, again, helpful to tune the way you target your customers. The other thing that's important is the conversion ratio. So as opposed to calling, if you have that magic product that flies off the shelves or in an e-commerce nature, then you don't have to worry so much about this, because if you get a million hits on your website, you'll make 100,000 conversions or whatever they are. But if your business is more personal and you need to interact with people, then you need to understand, if you have a real opportunity where someone is interested in your product, they have the inclination and the time to consider what you're offering, how many of those will turn into revenue? So the true conversion. I don't know if you've measured this. A lot of people don't.
Is this ARPU basically?
It's like ARPU for a telco.
Yeah.
So a telco would measure this. This is, ARPU is revenue per person, per end user, right? This is more not per person, because that person will have an ongoing relationship with you. This is per transaction, if you like. So in your everyday business, if you, every time someone walks into your retail, or every time you have a inquiry from someone, it becomes an opportunity because you have a match, and then don't forget you have competition, you have people that lose their budgets, you have people that, you know, how many reasons can you think of right now as to why people don't do things? Recession. What else? There's, you know, my boss won't let me. I don't know. Salespeople, you've heard them all, right? But essentially, there's always reasons why people won't go ahead and execute on a transaction, because that's life, right? Every time you walk into a car showroom, do you buy a car? It doesn't happen, right? So this is basically understanding the science behind these numbers. And again, still simplistic, sorry.
But I think this is only based on history, right? This is only based on history. You cannot forecast the ratio.
Yeah, it's a good question. Good question. So the question is, you can only do this if you have history, right? Yeah, that's sort of 100% correct. But what you can do is start thinking about, what am I expecting, right? So if in the last 6 months we've had, you know, you don't know how many calls you've had, right? So you don't know the history, the facts. But you can start with a particular thing in mind. So, right, if we get 1 in 10, that's good, or that's terrible. Or if we get 30% conversion, it means we're doing a good job. It kind of doesn't matter, because all I'm telling you is you should start looking at this now, going forward. You should definitely look at it in terms of planning how you go about your business, and then keep track of it and make decisions based on this. Not many people measure this. Large companies have spent millions of dollars in analytics and millions of dollars in complex business analysis tools to get to the bottom of this. You know, the retailers, the big brands who have distribution angles, they spend tens and tens of millions of dollars understanding what motivates people, and when they make an inquiry, you know, all of that science. There's a lot of science to this. If you can't afford that,
Honestly, they're still missing.
they're still missing.
Many of them, they're still like,
That's-
missing my milestone.
They're still missing. They're still missing. That's right. So if and even they're missing, right? So and they have a lot of money to put into this stuff. So if you want to do something a little bit more interesting, just focus on your sales interaction and how you go about driving your business to make a difference to the bottom line hard revenue. So we're not talking about this broad statistics about what if and this and this. We're just, you know, if I get 2 out of 10 leads and out of those 2, I turn 1 of those into hard revenue, start measuring from there. Yeah.
I mean, what's the use case of this ratio? I mean, I can understand that this is like an indication of how the business is doing.
It's not really a KPI. The revenue is the KPI.
Yeah, I mean,
Revenue is the KPI, but I'm going to sort of try and help you sort of join the dots. The use case is sort of building, yeah?
It's to measure success of the process and to optimize the sales process and everything.
Yeah, to measure and optimize the process is definitely the behind the scenes. But once you have this in place, it's you can forecast. You can become a lot better at forecasting. But actually, I'm going to suggest something even more important than forecasting, because forecasting is like trying to predict something. But what I want to do is talk about how you can actually get a hardcore better result by knowing what your numbers are and doing something about it. Hard results. Okay, so that's where we're going. Let me build. Yeah, each one of those on their own don't really stand up for anything. You know, you really need to do them together. The problem is it does take a little bit of effort. This is, again, working on your business, not in your business. You do have to spend some time studying what's going to work for you, for your types of products and services, and how you can take it to the market in a different way. I can guarantee you not many organisations are doing this at all. So what it leads to is how many leads are really required. This is where the rubber meets the road. I promise you this gets really challenging now. You can make a big difference by taking it head on. So the leads that you need coming into your business for a particular product, whether it's 1 or 50 obviously gets difficult. So if you had 50 products or services, you'd want to maybe categorize those. But the leads that you need to come into your business is the target of that particular product or service, and divided by the average revenue you expect from a sale. Again, simple maths and pretty trivial, and divided by the leads to opportunity ratio, then divided by the opportunity to revenue ratio. So you can forget about all that. It sounds a bit sort of circular, but let me put it to you this way. If you have a target of $10,000 and the average revenue from that product or service is $1,000, so talking retail sort of stuff, maybe. If your lead to opportunity ratio was 10% only, 1 in 10 leads come in, only 1 in 10 become an opportunity. In other words, you got a lot of tie kickers ringing up saying, what does your product, whatever, but they're not the right type of people ringing in. And then the opportunity to revenue ratio is only 10%. The cold hard fact, unfortunately, is that you would need 1,000 leads to make your target. And these dials and levers that we're talking about, you looking at for your business, is where you could potentially do a pretty small improvement in these two categories, would like from 10 to 20% in obviously compounds because it's a divide effect, right? You go down to 250 leads needed to make the same target. If you go to 30% lead to opportunity ratio and increase your opportunity win ratio to 50%, which is quite hard, but can be done, you're down to under 100. Question from a salesperson. Yeah, this will be a tricky. Yeah.
What if you're a startup and you don't have those numbers?
Yeah. So if you're a startup, you've got to think about. So you need leads, right? So how do you know what leads to focus on? So you probably be pessimistic and say, well, what if 10 people ring in? How much is going to be rubbish? 50% would be very difficult to achieve. So maybe start with 20%. So if I have a 20%, 2 out of 10 people ring in are definitely going to become opportunities. That's very conservative, right? So that comes back then to measuring how you do your marketing, how you go about your business, getting the right type of leads coming to you as opposed to the wrong type of leads. So if you're advertising cars but you sell trucks, 0 out of 10, right? Or it also depends on how you go about your lead generation business and other factors, which we're probably not going to dive in today. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you just make a little bit of a difference in a couple of different dials and levers, you can significantly reduce the amount of incoming leads you need. You don't want to be at this end. That's hard work, yeah? So you tune your process to suit this. We're going for time, so I need to keep moving. The other thing is that is quite difficult is the fact that in your business, you need to differentiate between how many leads marketing needs to generate for you, or marketing needs to generate, versus how many leads you want salespeople to generate. And in most companies I talk to, there is it's kind of the elephant in the room no one wants to talk about. Everyone else expects everyone else to do their job, right? So you have to be clear about where the leads are going to come from. And you have to have a plan and strategy to address it. So I'll move pretty quick now. And then your UBV, your USP, your unique selling proposition, is then differentiated based on the potential customer. So if you deal with your prospect, if you sell trucks and cars and you treat everyone like you sell trucks, how many cars are you going to sell? Very little, right? So along those lines, have a unique selling proposition broadly speaking, they might be similar. You know, if it's the same product, they're going to be similar, but you've got to be in the context of that person that's looking at your product or service. So this is the unique pitch. You've got to have a unique pitch for the individuals. If you sell clothes to men and women and you pitch it the same, what's going to happen? No, the women will buy. Because it doesn't matter with women, right? Is that right? So, okay. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. This gets a bit complicated. The slides are available, and there's so much material here. You know, feel free to reach out and we can talk about. But essentially, you need to have your sales process at least understood, that you can address the different combinations of people that are going to be interested in your service or product. If you generalize it, answer the phone, hello, etc., it's not going to work out for you too well. So really focus on the different types of lead sources that come in, the different types of products and services you have, the different customer types that you have. So you tune your process around the different stages that along. I mean, people in sales will understand the different phases or sales stages that you'll have. Qualify is an interesting one. We'll talk about that quickly. A lot of businesses that I talk to regularly get an inquiry for a price quote, and every quote comes in, they do. Every inquiry that comes in, they do a quote. Does that make sense? It shouldn't, because not everyone's, you know, necessarily interested in your product. They just want a quote. so this is something to differentiate. I'm conscious of time. So the thing to do is to really cover all the different combinations: incoming, outbound inquiries, outbound leads, inbound leads. Create scripts, meeting guides, checklists and templates, so you actually, out of the box, not dealing with everyone exactly the same way. You know, don't have a thank you email that the truck driver and the tractor driver is different email, right? Possibly. If you do everything manually yourself, then you can deal with that. But if you have 10 salespeople, they can't do that. It's not going to happen. So systemize it this way and differentiate and have out-of-the-box templates that will help you deal with that volume or the fact that you have to differentiate. And then, for example, the qualification process is one of the hardest one in sales. Salespeople find it hard to say, no, I don't have a product for you. And they'll try and twist the product to suit the customer's need. You know, and that's human nature. I've done it. I try not to today after so much time talking about it, but still you think, oh, how can I help? You know, maybe if sometimes it's better to say, look, no, you're better off going over there. They have something that suits you much better. Maybe next time when they need this product that I have, they'll come back. So there's some hard questions you can ask about not just understanding whether that customer is appropriate for your solution, as well as is it the right time, do they have the right budgets, etc. Okay, so super oversimplifying this sales process, but in a nutshell. And then, as an example, if you have an incoming phone inquiry for product X and customer type Y, have a specific script maybe that's appropriate for that combination. Have an email template that's appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Truck Driver. You'll be really happy to know that we have 3 trucks that will suit your requirements. You know, 1 diesel, 1 petrol, blah, blah, blah. You then maybe have to have a meeting with them to sell the truck. You know, you're not going to do it over the phone or like Nike shoes. And then you'll have a meeting guide for that. You maybe have a qualification checklist. So for a truck driver, you know, the question might be, do you have a truck today? Yes. How old is your truck? 20 years old. Why do you want to change trucks? It's broken or whatever, you know, etc. So have the appropriate questions so you know that this is the right kind of prospect that you can be engaging with. And then if you're lucky and it's the right type of truck driver, you then do a proposal for them that's tuned to their need. A lot of salespeople don't focus on need, and this is the most important thing, so focus on their need. If you sell what they need, then it's a good combo. And then you might have a proposal template. You then potentially need to negotiate, especially around here, or actually pretty well everywhere. So you then negotiate. You might want a checklist on what your negotiation parameters are to close the sale. Excuse me. I won't go into this too much more. You have the slides, but it doesn't end there. Once you, one of the key factors that you may want to consider is the measuring your success and your failure. So instead of just saying thank you very much for your order and giving them customer service, you may want to interrogate them, literally, and find out why they bought your product or service, because you can use this again. If you interrogate them about why they picked you over the competition, there's a good chance you're going to learn something, wouldn't you say? Yeah? And if you interrogate them in a nice way, I mean, interrogation is in a nice way, of course. You may also be in a position to ask them for referrals, which not many people do, by the way, except insurance salespeople. Anybody sell insurance here? No. Insurance must be a hard job in this country. Insurance salespeople always ask you for, or business advice, investment advisors, they ask for referrals all the time. Nobody else does. And testimonies, when you have a happy customer, would they be happy to be a testimonial? So there's a whole bunch of process you can design. It looks complex, it does take time, but you can get to a point where you can start measuring and tuning the process. So to answer your question from before, once you have some history, if you capture it going forward, you can then change the way you go about your business. So you'll measure a whole bunch of different things like results, etc., but also how long it takes to go from one phase to another. So for this type of customer X buying product Y, why does it take 6 weeks versus every other product 2 weeks? Stuff like that. So they're the sort of 10 sort of core areas. I hope you sort of picked up on, I mean, it's a bit of work, so hopefully if you've got some inclination to change some of your sales result, this potentially could help you. So essentially, everybody was right in terms of the formula, but essentially, sales really comes from only qualified opportunities. It doesn't come from anything else. If it comes from anything else, it's a bluebird, which was really an automatic qualifier. So you've heard the term bluebirds, right? So if you have a sale, it's most likely to be from a qualified opportunity. Qualified means they were interested in what you have, and your product suited their need closely. They might have looked at competition, there might be price factors, other things, but essentially those things have to be true. And qualified opportunities only come from good leads. Very rare a bad lead becomes a qualified opportunity. So it's stating the obvious, and obviously good leads come from people. So, that's obviously you need to be able to deal with people. I'm sure you all can. A lot of material, and we're sort of right on time. We didn't have a lot of questions there, but happy to open up for a little bit longer for open forum. But essentially, a lot of material, a lot of not covering it in a lot of detail. So if you want, I can email you. I think the presentation is going to be provided anyway from Rika. But if you had any question, please email me and I can cover that off with you.